Shalom, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. It's the last day of Pesach, and for well over 1,000 years, we have observed Yizkor on the last day of the big Jewish holidays. Pesach is 8 days long. We have Yizkor on the 8th day of Pesach. Shavuos is 2 days long. We have Yizkor on the 2nd day of Shavuos. Sukkot is 7 days long, but Shemini, Atzeres, and Simchas Torah come along. And so, paralleling Pesach, we have Yizkor on the 8th day of Sukkot, or Shemini Atzeres. Yom Kippur is only 1 day long, thank goodness. And so we have Yizkor in the middle of the day, you might say approaching the end of Yizkor, of Yom Kippur. So Yizkor is a way of closing off a Jewish holiday, a holiday which by personal experience and by communal tradition has family members very much a part of the experience. And because I feel like doing something just a little bit different this year, you notice that, courtesy of David Smith helping to set up all the equipment, we're not in the sanctuary. We're not in the chapel. We're at the space where we traditionally, for the past 20 or so years, have had a shul seder. And it's reminiscent of your own home family table. When we miss our loved ones, there's no more apparent sense of loss than when families gather together around a large table. So this morning, in the year 5781, the year 2021, which has been marked in many different ways, we're going to have Yizkor here near the family table. And I'm modifying the service because I want to reach into your home and your experience. And we'll be doing a little bit of the prayer service from the Siddur. But if you happen to not have the Siddur, I think you'll be able to make your way anyway. Although if you do wish to say the Kaddish and you don't know it by heart, you may need to have a Siddur at the ready. For now, we're going to begin by asking that if you have a tallis, you're invited to put the tallis on in your own home. And once the tallis is upon us, we're going to sing Hine Matov. It's good for us to be together. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. It's beautiful for us to all come together. Let's do the Shema. And if you know the Shema, just sing along. It's the Shema and the first paragraph. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayo hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvalechtecha v'derech, uveshachbecha v'kumecha, ukeshartam la'ot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein enecha, uktavtam al mezuzot betecha, uvesharecha. Fast forward to a bracha inside the Amidah. I think many of us are familiar with hearing about the Amidah, perhaps even davening or chanting parts of the Amidah. But thinking about being in your home this day, my thoughts turn specifically to the fifth of the 7 brachot of the Amidah. In the Hebrew, it's v'techazena. It speaks of coming home again. And in the grand scheme of the theology of the prayer book, it's referring to the hope, the need for Jewish people scattered all over the world to come back to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. But I'm thinking about you and your home and your family and the people whom you're missing, and the people missing from my home and my family. So just listen for a brief moment to an English version of the 5th bracha of the Amidah. Adonai, our God, embrace your people Israel, embrace their prayer, restore worship to your sanctuary. May the prayers of the people Israel be lovingly accepted by you as they continue upon their journey home. And may our service always be pleasing. May our eyes behold your compassionate return to Zion, our shared home. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, God, who restores your divine presence to your home, Zion. God, embrace your people and their prayer. And that is my prayer this morning. And now we're turning to Hallel on page 316 if you have the Siddur. And again, I'm going to jump around just a little bit. I'm going to abbreviate Hallel. But it is the holiday of Pesach, and we have to talk about getting out of Egypt. And that's the significance of B'tzeit Yisrael. If you have the Siddur, it's on the bottom of page 316. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'es, leaving Egypt. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'es. Hayta Yehuda lekodsho, Yisrael mam shelotav, hayam ra Vayanos hayarden yisov lachor, B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'es. Ha'arim rakadu cha'elim, Gevot kibnei tzon. Ha'arim rakdu cha'elim, Gevot kibnei tzon. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'es. Malacha hayam, kitanus, hayarden, tisov lachor, heharim, terkeduchelim, Gevot, kibnei tzon, milifnei adon, chuli aretz, milifnei, Eloha Yaakov, hahofchi hatzur, agamayim, chalamish, lemainomayim. Thank you for singing along. That element is supposed to be interactive and upbeat. Yes, the last day of Pesach, Yizkor, makes us think of whom we're missing, but it's still national celebration, getting out of Egypt with a free card day. That's Pesach, 8 days worth of celebrating, but toning down the atmosphere just a bit. Again, thinking about having lost loved ones. And now we're on page 319, and it's just one line. It's Min HaMeitzar. Meitzar means a narrow, compressed place. Min HaMeitzar means from a narrow, compressed place. Karatiya, I called out, God! Anani, answer me. Vamerchav, for you are broad and wide and deep and expansive. Anani vamerchav ya. So the hard word to learn is vamerchav. Vamerchav. Min ha-meitzar karatiya anani vamerchav ya. Min ha-meitzar karatiya anani vamerchavya. Anani, anani, anani vamerchavya. Anani, anani, anani vamerchavya. Min ha-meitzar karatiya anani vamerchavya. Min ha-meitzar karatiya anani vamerchavya. Anani, anani, anani vamerchavya. Anani, anani, anani vamerchavya. And now on page 320, 4 short verses in English, repeated, and then we'll nearly conclude Hallel, do a very brief Haftarah study, go on to Yizkor and conclude. In the middle of page 320, it's the third stanza down. I will offer thanks to you, God, for you answered me, and you were my rescuer. I will offer thanks to you, God, for you answered me, and you were my rescuer. The stone the builders rejected has become the keystone. The stone the builders rejected has become the keystone. This is Adonai's doing. How wondrous it is in our sight. This is Adonai's doing. How wondrous it is in our sight. This is the day that Adonai has made. We shall celebrate and rejoice in it. This is the day that Adonai has made. We shall celebrate and rejoice in it. And if we sing, this is the day that Adonai has made, we shall celebrate and rejoice in it, Zeh hayom asa Adonai, nagila v'nismechavo, Zeh hayom asa Adonai, nagila v'nismechavo. Here again we begin with an echo. And the echoes build one upon the next. And it's, Anna Adonai Hoshiana, oh God, please help. And that's twice. And then Hatzlicha, please help us to prosper. So it's help and then it prosper. Begins like this. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Your turn. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. My turn. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Hatzlicha. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam batishbachot. And you can say Amen, indicating one of the big three holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. They're called Yom Tov, or Yom Tov, or Yantif in Yiddish. And Pesach, as you know, has a very special element to it. The first two nights we opened the door, and who was walking in the door? Maybe a long-lost relative, but ideally Elijah. And Elijah within Jewish tradition is thought of as the herald of the Mashiach. When Elijah comes, we know that the Mashiach is not that far away. And deep within the Jewish tradition concerning Mashiach, the Messiah, is that the entire world, without any limitations or constraints, will receive blessings of justice and peace. The Jewish tradition of Messiah does not mean or does not demand that people have to become Jewish. Far from it. The Jewish tradition of Messiah teaches that the whole world will receive blessings of peace and safety and security and justice, righteousness and freedom for all. So the Haftorah that we recite, in this case we're going to study just briefly, is from Isaiah. If you have the Chumash that we use, we're going to be on page 1316, page 1316, page 1316. And Isaiah is speaking with poetry, pages 1316 and following. It's chapter number 11. A root shall grow forth out of the stump of Jesse. Imagine that as you're walking into a field or a meadow, you see a tree that's been cut down, and perhaps there's still a stump, a vestige of a trunk, and it's fairly big, and you see a small twig growing out of it. You can look at this two ways. You can say, oh my gosh, look at the great loss. That beautiful old oak tree was felled. But you can also see new life. And the new life that's growing up out of that devastation is a promise for the future. It's going to be different. It's not going to look exactly like that tree. The shape, the size, the configuration, how the branches eventually grow forth and are bent will be different. But it's going to be a promise of new life. And I think that's what Isaiah is saying. A shoot shall grow up out of the stump of Jesse, that's a descendant of King David. A twig shall sprout, and the Spirit of the Lord shall alight upon this one. A spirit of wisdom and insight, a spirit of counsel and valor, a spirit of devotion and reverence for God. So the new future is going to be someone who's going to have all the necessary characteristics to lead us all forward in a future of caring and of values and of commitment and devotion and of humility. And that's how new life, new growth will come forth. And it won't be the same as the growth that had been eventually lost because of corruption, abuse, racism, closed-mindedness, bias, fear, and hate. And then on verse number 5, you know this, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and then into 6 and 7, the leopard shall lie down with the small goat, the kid, the calf, and the beast of prey, and the little lamb will all be together. Now, how could a lamb lie down with a wolf or a beast of prey? You and I know that a wolf or a beast of prey is going to tear apart a kid, a lamb, a little baby goat. Isaiah is saying that when this descendant of Jesse, of King David, goes forth, the whole world is going to be transformed by the overarching expression, the contagion of justice and respect and honor and love. So much so that even predatory animals will become vegetarian. Does it really mean that predatory animals are going to stop eating prey? No. But he's teaching that there's going to be just an expansiveness of freedom from fear. That even animals won't be afraid anymore. And a little child will be able to play amongst all the animals. That's what Isaiah is saying in poetry. And then furthermore, he says, Ush'avtem mayim b'sasom mimanei Yeshua. And maybe you remember the well-known Israeli folk dance. Ush'avtem mayim b'sason mimanei Yeshua. Mayim, 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 mayim. It comes from Isaiah, that all of you will have enough water to sustain you in joy, in happiness, in satiety, and peacefulness. So on the last day of Pesach, as we conclude a very special period of 8 days of mindfulness, of focusing on what it means to exit slavery, the Haftorah is escorting us into a hoped-for new future where animals and people will not be afraid. There will be blessing and safety and security and fullness and satiety. And now we turn to Yizkor. And if you have the Siddur, we're on page 330. And you see how our tradition, placing Yizkor next to the Haftorah for the day, recognizes the challenges and the kishkas that we're all sharing. Because on the one hand, we definitely miss all of our loved ones, and there are holes and there are gaps in our lives. And the other, it's still the holiday of Pesach, which represents so much for all of us. And then from the depths of my heart, I offer you my own hope, my own peace, my own prayer, that you come to a fullness and a satiety of spirit, and that your loss eventually diminishes. But we will always remember, and with love, mark the absence of our families. So on page 330, Adonai ma'adam v'tero'ehu ben enosh v'tachashvehu Adam lahavel dama yamav ketzel over baboker yotzitz v'cholof le'erev yomel v'yovesh limnot yomenu ken hoda v'navi levav chochma. Adonai, what are human beings that you take account of them, mortals that you care for them? Humans are as a breath, their days like a passing shadow. In the morning they flourish anew, in the evening they shrivel and die. Teach us to count each day, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. We recall, some of us recall parents who gave us life, who cared for us and nurtured us, and who taught us to take our first steps on our own. Some of us remember a wife, husband, or partner our friend and lover, with whom we shared so much of our lives, our failures and achievements, joys and sorrows, intimate secrets. Some of us recall brothers and sisters who matured together with us, sometimes competing with us and sometimes encouraging us on, bound to us by a lifelong relationship. Some of us remember children entrusted to us too briefly, to whom we gave our loving care and from whom we received a trust that enriched our lives. Their memory is always with us. Many of us recall relatives who knew us, teachers who affected us, and beloved friends who walked beside us in life, guiding us, listening to us, supporting us. Our lives are shaped by those who were alongside us as we walked on our path. May our inheritance impel us to strive to live lives of holiness and service. May memories of love inspire us to love. May painful memories impel us to mitigate the pain others experience. And may we be granted the strength to affirm life's meaning even in the face of death. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini ba'alamut, Lachein samach libi v'egal kodi, af b'sari yishkon levetach. Adonai is always before me. At my right hand lest I fall. Therefore I am glad, made happy, though I know that my flesh will lie in the ground forever. And now we take a moment or two of private thought, thinking of and remembering our loved ones. You may have a Siddur, and before you on page 335, or on the Hebrew or the English side, we have passages that are appropriate for various relatives and loved ones. And if you do not have the Siddur at this time, perhaps you compile a private thought or two in silence. On page 337, Mizmor David, the 23rd Psalm. And I do point out an element. Many people associate the 23rd Psalm with death because of the famous phrase, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." But when the psalm was first constructed, it was a personal psalm, perhaps by David for David himself. And in the very early days that we started to have what we call a prayer book tradition, this psalm was recited not with funerals and not with loss. Do you know when? This psalm was traditionally recited late Saturday afternoon before Shabbos ended by a showing of 3 stars in the night sky. And many still observe that tradition of saying or singing or meditating upon this psalm just before making Havdalah. It's only when people began to say this, to my knowledge, in the past recent 300, 400, 500 years perhaps, let's say, and they began hearing the term Valley of the Shadow of Death, that they began to associate it with funerals or unveilings or memorial services. Because the overall tone, which interjects a theme of being alone, is modulated by the theme of confidence and optimism and hope. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God lays me down in green pastures, leads me to still waters, renews my life, guides me in right paths, for that is God's way. Though I walk through a valley as dark as death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in the full view of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup is overflowing. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. And may your loved ones dwell in the house of God forever. Kaddish is on page 338. You're invited to rise at this time. If you have a Siddur, please feel free to join in. If not, perhaps you can join in from memory, and we'll offer the Kaddish slowly. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi. Amen. Be'olma divra chir ute v'yam lich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imeru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mivarach le'olam ulolmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha B'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'meru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen. May all of you know that you are loved and you are cared for deeply. May you be consoled in your moments of loss, and may you walk forward. And the next time that you see a tree stump, may you also notice new growth. And may that lift you up and encourage you. We'll conclude with the Adon Olam. If you have the Siddur, we're on page 211. Page 211. See if you can catch on to this melody. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chevtza kol azay melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh b'tif ara v'hu echad v'ein sheni lam shilo lahachbira b'li reshit b'li tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra v'hu eli v'chai goali v'tzur chevli be'et tzara v'hu nisi umanosli manat kosi b'yom ekra b'yado avkid ruchi b'et ishan b'a'ira v'imruchi gviyati Adonai li v'lo ira Adon lama asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra liet nasa v'chev tekol azai melech shemo nikra. That's from Adirhu, which we sing traditionally the first two nights during the Seder. May you have a sweet and healthy and happy remainder of Pesach. Remember, no chametz until tonight about 8:15 or so. It has to be dark before we start eating again. May you be blessed with health and safety and peace. And I look forward to seeing you at some point, hopefully in the very near future. May God bless you always with love, health, and peace. Shalom.